is NDTV and you are watching NDTV Prime.
Welcome to a brand new episode of MotorHeads, and you can see we're not in a studio setting this week. We're inside the manufacturing facility for Mercedes-Benz in Chakan, just outside of Pune. It's somewhere where we've brought you before, but it's a nicer and a little different setting to get in with our interview today. It is Mr. Roland Folger, who heads operations here in India. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And thanks for letting us into the plant. It's always a pleasure to be here and step inside and just be a part of this entire process. You know, seeing the cars rolling off the line, always special. The car behind you, I mean, everybody's talking about it. This is the big important model. So let's start by talking about the new E-Class. Yeah. It's always been an important model for Mercedes-Benz India, but it's become a little extra special, hasn't it?
Absolutely. No, thank you first of all for coming here. We're very house proud, I would say. And so therefore we would love to, and we always like to share what we're doing here also with the outside. But you're right about the E-Class, certainly, and just to give you a rough number, out of the 100,000 vehicles that we sold over the last 10 years, 30,000 alone, one third of our overall production and sales was always E-Class. So that's why we wanted to also take extra care, moving now into the new generation with what we call internally the 213, that vehicle basically fits to the Indian market and the customer expectations and requirements to the utmost extent. And what you see behind us here now is exactly such kind of a vehicle.
Now, of course, the big talking point really for all of us in the media has been the long wheelbase. It's something that you've clearly thought about, you know, really sort of in detail and then figured out why it should be brought in, pros, cons, etc. What was the reaction of your dealers when you first told them you're going to do it?
Well, first of all, because they knew that that vehicle and its concept is not anywhere available. See, we take dealers on a regular basis also to meetings in Germany. We expose them to the new products that are coming. And I would say none of our dealers had that car concept really on their agenda. So when we showed it to them the first time, I still remember our first meeting with them. We had it basically parked on the lowest level in a garage that we could cut off from anything else. And so we basically just passed them by, and you should have seen their faces. For me, an unforgettable moment, because it was just like that. It was something that nobody really expected, and you have to experience it yourself. You know, there's this effect of sitting in a car that offers so much more than we used to have in the past, and that they also expected. It was a really revealing moment.
Does it, I mean, now that the car is here, it's been in the market now and everybody knows it's arrived. Yeah. Obviously certain customers have already got their hands on it as well. What's the sense you're getting now? I mean, there's one thing to launch something which is a complete departure from the rest of the market, and so, you know, you create a nice USP versus the competition. Yeah. But do you think in many ways this car is now in its own segment? People
have a certain expectations from what they want and what they expect from their vehicle. We in the automotive industry, we create artificially segments per se. But the background of all of that is predominantly that we wanted to fulfill what customer needed. And sometimes you have to stick your neck out and do something that if you would have asked customers might not have been their first priority. Yeah? So because people, when we talk to them as well in the early stages of our investigation, said, oh, the E-Class is large enough.
Yeah, you know, we're not unhappy with what we get.
We're fully okay, and when you see what the competition is offering at the moment also, it's not, you know, that you're really missing something. But now to realize that for a incremental price and value of the vehicle, you get so much more. And let's not forget, when we did the first studies and evaluation, that was a few years ago. In the meantime, you see traffic all over India becoming more and more difficult, I would say, in a positive sense. But you certainly in Delhi, in Bangalore, in Mumbai, even in Pune, you spend so much more time on the road that people are starting to realize there is a quality time on how you can do that. And with that quality time, we mean specifically have the comfort, be able to stretch your legs, cross your legs, have a relaxing ride to the utmost possible, including, you know, the backrest that can go back a few inches. And I think all of these things now come together and people are starting to realize how much more you really can do. Yeah. And now everybody says, well, why didn't we do that much earlier? Of course.
Well, of course. That's, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. Yeah. But the question then has to be asked, when you mentioned the incremental price. Yeah. What's the reaction to that? I mean, are people still sort of lining up like you're expecting them to? Is it better than expected? What's the first immediate reaction?
I mean, I'm happy to say we were conservative in our planning because there is no point in the luxury segment to really push. No, and the German comes in a little bit as well. No, but we wanted to see really first customer reaction. The response was much, much more than we expected, I might say. Yeah, because people suddenly started to realize for an additional money over their past vehicles, they could get so much more. And that in the meantime, and we look at also order intake, we look at our order bank on the E-Class, is it encouraging now to nicely ramp up?
Now, is it fair to say that some of that is the sort of the honeymoon phase? I mean, this is the novelty factor, the car is brand new. Where do you see that sort of ending up? I mean, the kind of demand you're going to see a few months down the line compared to the demand you were seeing on the previous generation, how much higher do you expect this to be?
Well, all in over, it's highly, I would say, fulfilling and even over-fulfilling our expectations, what we see in the marketplace at the moment. The positive thing is we have ramped up with the 350, we have ramped up with the 200 on the petrol side, and what we see as order bank coming in is more than we initially expected. So yes, even if you take the honeymoon phase into consideration, this is still much more than we anticipated. So obviously the price-value ratio really seems to work for people. Of course, we have to see what our competitors doing. We have to see when can we also introduce new versions of the vehicle as well, and there is something in the making, everybody knows already. But basically we're also not shy in upping a little bit our output because customers now really get interested in the vehicle. And the more you see on the street, the more other people are coming in, and suddenly when they realize, and we should never underestimate word of mouth as a propaganda for a vehicle, people are really impressed with what they have on their hands at the moment. So I would say we're definitely on top of our targets. We see a development that we perceive as to being stronger than with the previous models, even with a, I would say, more challenging price and value ratio, but that does not seem to deter customers at the moment at all. So we are looking into a very, very positive E-Class future in India as well.
All right, you made a very subtle reference there to the smaller diesel that we're all expecting anyway. New engines is one thing. Do you also think that with a car like this, given the fact that it's upping the ante on the luxury and the feature quotient, that you also might need to do a little bit different things inside the cabin?
No,
going forward.
At the moment, moving forward, we need to see first. The honeymoon phase is an important phase in every car manufacturer's ramp up.
It also sets a benchmark.
But what we are looking into are also the feedback naturally from customers, and you can never hit it 100% or 150% even though you try very much. So we're learning at the moment again from customer, and with the same attitude that gave us this long wheelbase version in India, I think with the same attitude we will also be looking into what can be improved on the vehicle. And there is always something that you know from us where we keep on thinking and trying to optimize the unimprovable versions of our vehicles, but of course there's always something out there. It's just very, very early in the stage to already basically show and shape and see what we'll be needing to do. Because just as we explained in the beginning also, it was a unique chance for us to get such a vehicle from the Chinese market and then combine it with the right-hand drive version, making it very unique in India, not only in India, in the rest of the world as well. But we now need to learn what are the next steps, what is the next level of improvement that we can basically come up with. But that is a long time down in the future as well.
Now there's a couple of things coming up in the near future that will possibly have some sort of bearing on all of this in a way. And these are some of the things that I know a lot of our viewers like to also sort of know from you. The first is that in terms of competition, you get the new generation of the 5 Series. So that's going to be one sort of big moment. And then the second would be GST. So let me talk about the competition part. I'm not going to ask you to obviously comment specifically on that model, but it's always an interesting phase to see that, right? And typically, we have big chunks of gaps between these models coming. It's the first time we're seeing two new generations from the two big rivals coming out so quickly close to each other. So how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, it is always very, very close usually, but that is a traditional thing because we are carrying our life cycles in the 7 to 7.5 years roughly cycle. And that naturally provokes that once you're starting close with your competitors, you always do that. I think what came as a big surprise that we really went out and only offered the vehicle in a long wheelbase version. But for us, and maybe I can explain that also briefly, it was actually a no-go area. This was the only thing that made sense. Once we understood that the Indian customer is basically in majority of his time being chauffeur-driven, at least during the week, maybe also on the weekend, but not necessarily so, the majority of his time is spent in the rear of the vehicle. So to optimize the car to that imaginary few percent where he ever sits in the front of the car was certainly something that we took into consideration, but we didn't max it out to an extreme into an extreme version. And we still, in the future, also will have our AMG versions to cover that area. No fear. So there will be driver-oriented vehicles also from us in the future on the E-Class. And we have all the liberty that we can think about when we talk CBU. But as far as local production is concerned, this is definitely an area where we feel we're exactly in the right spot with a vehicle that is so strongly oriented towards chauffeur-driven vehicles.
All right, so hold that thought, and we're going to take a very short break here. We come back and talk about that second point, GST. It's really important, and we will discuss that after this short break.